amount of relevant information in these times of rapid and forced change, with his talk on the invisible world governance and the truth and lies of the London 7-7. Tony used his journalistic skills and inquiring personality to pick sizable holes in the official version of 7-7, the BBC Conspiracy Files programme of the London bombings. But also shine a very bright light indeed on the people who work in the shadows to bring about totalitarianism, the globalists, not all of them politicians, but most of these people we actually pay. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Gosling.
Thanks very much, Rob. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
One of the main things we're going to be talking about this evening is this BBC programme was on about 2 weeks ago, on the Conspiracy Files programme on 7/7 London bombings. Now, can I just have a show of hands of people who saw that programme, BBC 2, about 2 weeks ago? Thanks. So it's about half. Now, it doesn't matter too much if you didn't see it, but what I'll be doing tonight is talking about the media generally as someone who's worked in broadcasting from behind the scenes and seeing now the way the war on terror is transforming into very much more of a media battle. It's about a battle of the hearts and minds, using the press, using the transmitters, and I can tell you the journalists come in for a lot of stick. The problem is, the journalists don't own the printing presses, the journalists don't own the transmitters. The journalists are hired and fired by the big media barons, people like the Barclay brothers, we'll be talking about later, who are billionaires, who buy and sell the Daily Telegraph, in their case, a massive influential organ of the press, as I would argue, for political influence. So no longer is the wonderful national press and broadcasting all about telling the truth and just simply being a conduit for information. It's now about winning hearts and minds for a global government, potentially, and certainly for the war on terror. The idea that the Western world has a mission to spread democracy in places like Pakistan, Afghanistan. A major part of the battle for hearts and minds, of course, is through the media. Right, well, I'll just introduce myself a little more than we heard from Rob just now. I actually studied up in Yorkshire, did a degree in Yorkshire at Ilkley College of Education, as it was at the time, in humanities and studied English literature. And then I went into the family aviation business, that is back down in southeast London, and that was quite a good, that was for about 4 years or so, and I've been brought up with aviation, and this was something that immediately prepared me quite well, I think, to do some analysis on September the 11th attacks. For example, the planes that went into those buildings, were they the same planes that took off? Planes get switched around. The 767, there's lots of different versions of those planes. Then I got involved in community radio in South East London, which was a little sort of voluntary thing, where I was in charge of community programmes and getting people from the community to come and make radio, because it's not difficult, and finding people who are particularly gifted in radio and getting them on the airwaves. Then I had a year and a half working for Greater London Radio, which is the BBC's London station, at a very interesting time, which was the time of the early 90s IRA bombing campaign, before the ceasefire. So, for example, it was a quite an interesting place to work, that newsroom, because when anything big happened in London, our newsroom was absolutely the first place to be buzzing about it. And I don't know how many people have ever experienced newsrooms, but I've been into the local newspaper newsroom in Bristol, and it's run by the Daily Mail, and it's very much a corporate operation and an establishment type operation, and actually, bizarrely, the newsroom there is almost silent. Our newsroom was completely different. If anything was going on, there'd be people shouting from one side of the newsroom to the other, the editor taking people off one story, putting in reporters onto another story, and it was a very lively place to work, and so you have to shout to be heard. And also, the other thing is, I don't know how many people would be any good at this, but you have to be able to really concentrate on one story. You can see the clock ticking away to your news bulletin in 2 minutes' time, and you've got to finish that story while people are shouting literally behind you about something completely different. So you've got to really be able to focus on the work that you're doing. Anyway, that was quite hairy, and then I got involved in other local radio stations in Wiltshire and where else? In Southampton, which was quite interesting. It was a military port in Portsmouth. We were doing a lot of stuff there. But I actually got really attracted to radio because it's so immediate. For example, the IRA bomb on the stock exchange in London back in 1992, we were the first to the scene. And the reason we were the first to the scene is just simply use of telephones. When we heard there'd been a bomb, various reporters were sent to the scene, and then I was amongst other people who were actually just getting on the telephone to find people who were eyewitnesses, had a view over the scene. And we got on about a minute after we heard. We had somebody on the airwaves right over London on FM describing the police turning up at the scene. So you can see that there's a kind of, it's almost like a chase, and you get a thrill of the chase. So try and get there first. You're always listening to the other radio stations too, the other news stations in London to see what information they've got. And it really was quite exciting. But when the London bombings happened, I felt there was just something very, very different to the experiences I'd had of the IRA attacks. There was this kind of whole way that the press was managed, and we've seen in that documentary the BBC put out the other week, even Brian Paddock complaining about the way that Tony Blair had announced that this was done by Muslim extremists, when there was no information as far as he knew, and he was supposed to be in charge of the investigation, that actually it was Muslim extremists. Now, this is very serious. If you've got the Prime Minister is briefing against the policeman who's in charge of the investigation, no wonder he's getting a little bit annoyed. And we've also seen in the last couple of weeks the banning of a book by Andy Hayman, who's the chief of the anti-terrorist branch, which was around about the time of 7/7. Special branch was got rid of in London, which is code for MI5 liaison with the local police. And the anti-terrorist branch was set up instead. Now, Andy Hayman's book, The Terrorist Hunters, was supposed to be, came out about 2 weeks ago, was supposed to be the definitive inside story of what happened in Scotland Yard on the 7th of July 2005. It was promptly banned by Baroness Scotland, who's the Attorney General. Now, he'd done the right thing. He sent his book to all the people he's supposed to send it to beforehand, including the intelligence services, Cabinet Office, etc. But still, there was an injunction to ban the book. And you know what? The reasons for the ban are also under an injunction. So the public is not allowed to know why the book is banned. So as you can see, there's an immense sensitivity, and it seems to me clearly a massive cover-up around 7th of July London bombings. Quite what really happened, we'll talk about a little bit later. At the moment, what I'm doing is radio in Bristol, so I have a weekly radio programme where last week we had Brian Gerrish on the programme. I don't know if people here have had a talk by him, have they?
Yeah.
Brian, we actually invited Common Purpose on, the South West Regional Office, which is in Bristol, on to debate with Brian, but they declined. And so we read a statement out from them. But you see, the thing is, I, as a trained journalist, what I try and do in situations like that is be as unsympathetic to Brian as I possibly can. So I do as good a job as I possibly could as a common purpose person would in the studio to put the difficult questions to him about his arguments. And that also helps stop the radio station getting sued, because we have to be balanced, and also we have to make sure that the wrong impression about common purpose is not given to the public. So a bit of both sides. I'm right up for that. And I have a lot of sympathy for Brian and his campaigning, but I also think as a professional journalist it's important, absolutely crucial, to show the other side, no matter what you actually think yourself about the situation. And I was very annoyed with Common Purpose for simply declining to come on the programme. I thought that says a great deal about the confidence they have to debate with Brian. So that's on a little radio station called BCFM, Bristol Community FM. I'm also editor of something called 9/11 Forum, where for a while there was a big competition for who was going to control and own this website, and then after a little while everyone seemed to have sort of abandoned it. But anyway, I took it on, and I'm now owner, jointly with a guy called Rob in Liverpool, and editor of this 9/11 Forum, which is a massive kind of database of loads of different articles, speculation and ideas around the whole war on terror, starting with 9/11 pretty much, but also looking at previous false flag type attacks. Anyway, so let's talk just briefly about 9/11. Now, the 9/11 movement in the UK has changed quite a lot over the years, but now it's a sort of caucus of about 4 or 5 people, including Annie Machon, a guy called Martin Summers from Bristol, and also Ian Neal and Ian Henschel, who are people who were right there right at the very start. And this is Ian Henschel's book, which is called 9/11, the latest one anyway, 9/11 New Evidence. And I would say, out of all of the British published books, there aren't that many, but this is a really good, useful one, and it's very unthreatening as well. It's just got the facts, it's got really good pictures of bits of evidence, it's got documents, and if you're looking for something which is, say for example, to give to your friend, your local Bobby, to read about 9/11, this is an excellent book by Ian Henschel. I think that's actually the right approach as well. And I may talk about this a bit more later, but if in our communities we see people behaving suspiciously in a terrorist-like way, and actually this is happening because these people are sometimes basket cases who are being manipulated by the intelligence services and others, the mafia, organised crime. It's important that we talk to our local police, that we have a good relationship with our local police, and don't trust Scotland Yard. We don't trust the anti-terrorist police in London, and we don't trust MI5 particularly. We talk to our local cops. This has just happened in Bristol last week. People may have seen on the news there was a supposed terrorist arrested and convicted in Bristol, and it was actually the local Muslim community in our city which handed him over to the police. The guy was an ex-heroin addict. People put their hands up if they remember this from the news last week. Yeah, because I'm not quite sure how far out of Bristol it gets, but it looks like it made the national news.
It's on Radio 4.
Great. Because what happened was, this guy was a heroin addict, and he was also obsessed with jihad terrorism. He was a very recent convert to Islam. And he started turning up at the mosques in Bristol, various different mosques, and started talking about suicide bombings, this kind of thing. Now, what happened, because the consciousness of the Muslims in Bristol is very high, I would say, they're very keyed up for this sort of thing, immediately they phoned their trusted local detectives. And the guy was arrested almost straight away. Because it's really important that this kind of patsy type situation where someone is being manipulated whatever way, or else they're just a basket case who thinks that they're going to be a terrorist, that those sorts of people are not able to successfully infiltrate the Muslim community.
Yes, but if he'd been a Muslim, would the Muslim committee have been so keen to grass him up?
He was a Muslim.
Yeah, but wasn't he English? Originally English?
He's Asian. Anyway, that I think is really important, that we've now got a level of awareness where these basket cases are noticed and handed into the local police. What often happens if information is given to the National Police and Scotland Yard is that information then disappears in a wastebasket somewhere. Okay, so let's just whiz through this beginning of the slideshow. This is actually comes from a German exhibition about slavery, and I think this is something that we must be just really aware of. This is going on in the background. The idea that people are being treated like just simply commodities, figures, numbers, and the idea is how can we get the most resources and the most out of the population. There's also a great deal of talk in amongst elite circles, that is ruling class, certain parts of the ruling classes, about depopulation, and they see us as, a problem, a serious problem. This, it seems, is always in the balance. The ID card system, is it going to happen? Isn't it? But it's great, I think, that George Orwell pre-prepared everybody for it, pretty much. Although I'm not sure about Orwell, because he had a contemporary writer, Aldous Huxley, and I've got a feeling that Huxley was maybe more accurate when he's talking about lulling the public into a false sense of security, rather than Orwell's very overt fascistic type state. So the truth of what is going to happen in the future and what is going on now is probably somewhere between Huxley and Orwell. Okay, this is really important. We in Bristol, for example, have got IBM now running our police civilian support services and North Somerset District Council. IBM are back. Now IBM, as Edwin Black has pointed out in his book, were absolutely key in the Nazi control of the population in the countries the Nazis invaded and in Nazi Germany. Because the machines that they used to sort people out, for example, when they gave orders to the Gestapo to go and arrest all the Jews or whatever, trade unionists in one quarter of the city, they used these IBM machines called the Hollerith machines, which were actually leased during the war from IBM in the United States. This is a fantastic book, really important book, and people forget too easily who it was that enabled the Gestapo to do their dirty work. And there's an advert from IBM in German, as you can see. But there's a comparison I put at the bottom there, which is with Capita. This sort of threatening thing of you're on the database. Be afraid. Be very afraid. So we're seeing a similar kind of the idea of back in Nazi Germany, it was punch cards. It was primitive computers. Now, just think what they can do with the computers they've got now. So this is one of my favourite images because it sums up a lot of what I'm about, which is a mixture. Somehow I've got one foot in the journalistic camp as a freelance journalist and another foot in the sort of slightly more wacko stuff. And you've got a little flying saucer there. Now, this pyramid, the capstone, as many of us know, is a very significant symbol. And that is a symbol of the elite. But it's not just the ruling classes, because we've got a lot of ruling classes who are not into any of this kind of stuff. We've got ruling classes in this country who are landowners, big landowners. This is complete anathema to them. So there is a faction within the ruling class, and this is why I actually think that we may have a civil war in the future. If you go back to the 1600s in this country, we had a civil war. It wasn't a revolution, don't kid yourself. We had a civil war between the landowning classes and the capitalist classes, so the moneyed class and the landed class, the feudal system versus the new capitalist system, and the capitalists with Cromwell won. Now, this is the sort of thing we may be seeing in the future. Now, I'm not saying we definitely will, maybe a long time, maybe a short time, but there is an absolute battle going on within these elite institutions and within the ruling class for what is this country really all about? Is it going to be part of an international superstate, a European superstate, which is ruled from the top down, or is it going to be from the bottom up? Well, we'll see. I ought to have said at the start that we will have questions at the end. Right? We're going to have a break after about another 40 minutes, and then I'm going to finish the talk, and then will be time for questions at the end. So if you can please keep your questions, and I can get through all this. This is another really important aspect to understanding the elite. This book, The Power Elite, actually that's not the front cover of it. That is the author, who's a US sociologist, zooming along on his motorbike. C. Wright Mills in the 1950s wrote what is probably one of the best academic but really readable analyses of American society. And in the 50s, this was absolute bestseller. His book was a real bestseller. It's been read by loads of students. Nowadays, he's almost forgotten about, and the book is really difficult. It's not been reprinted, etc. But back in the 1950s, there was a lot of analysis going on of the rise of what we're now starting to call the military-industrial complex. In fact, it was being called it back then, but now it's something else. What is it? It's Dick Cheney's Halliburton company, although it's not really directly anymore, and then they've got some shares still. But this is just to say that there are some really good studies of the way that American power politics works outside the democratic system. Here's another chap. Now, Charlie Richardson. Does anyone recognise this guy? Charlie, maybe not, okay, I was born in South London. Charlie Richardson was a South London criminal. The Richardson brothers were notorious as the criminals who used to run large parts of South London, the criminal sort of black markets in South London. And he was notorious as someone who would use bolt cutters to cut off the toes of anyone that crossed him. Now Charlie, under Harold Wilson, was finally convicted by the police and sent to prison. Now, when he came out, it was under Mrs. Thatcher. I think the year was, I've got here somewhere. Yeah, it was released in 1984. And he came out with the most amazing quote when he came out of prison, because he went straight into a job, guess where? In the City of London.